evening we are going to be discussing the 11th Sephiroth. So the Sephiroth that doesn't exist, or of the Sephiroth, because Sephiroth is plural, Sephira is singular, even though in my mind it should be the other way around, so I get confused. But Daath here, or Da'at, is sort of a little fuzzy. And part of the reason for that is that it says very clearly in a number of Kabbalistic texts that there are 10 Sephiroth, not 9, not 11, 10. They're very adamant. There's 10. So when they are dealing with this, what they do is they eliminate Kether. It seems like, that doesn't sound exactly kosher, but that's what they do. At any rate, it is one of the more mysterious of the Sephiroth, of these sort of centers of power. And traditionally, it doesn't have a magical image, doesn't have a god name or archangel name, so what are you supposed to do with it? Well, evidently you're just supposed to kind of not do anything with it. And yet, it turns out to be one of the more significant Sephiroth, especially having to do with our own consciousness, or the transformation of our consciousness, and the potential kind of magical transformation of external reality as well. Now, according to tradition, this was supposed to be the place of the son of the Divine Father, Chokmah, and the Divine Mother, Binah, the initial will, the substance. This was supposed to be their magical, fully, completely divine child. And yet, something went wrong. And what went wrong is never entirely clear. Hints are given here and there. But the result was that what was supposed to be here, fell. Some say that it fell to Tifereth. Some say it fell all the way down to Malkuth. But at any rate, what was no longer there was this place which would be the bridge between the supernals, the creative, emanative, absolutely divine, perfect power of creativity and manifestation, and the rest of manifestation. In particular, Malkuth down here where we are, which is very important because we're here. So there is said to be a break here. I'm not sure if Crowley called it that to beginning, or if we got that from the Golden Dawn, but it was called the Abyss, and was considered to be perhaps something difficult to cross. And there are a lot of theories, philosophical attempts to understand what this can be, but certainly, since it's not already prepared, it would indicate that, and by the name, Daath, the name Daath means knowledge, but obviously it's not what I would call book learning. This is way up there. Way up there. So it's not that. It is knowledge in the sense that the word that the Gnostics use, Gnosis. It's a divine knowledge. It's a higher knowledge. But it's something that we have to, in some sense, apply. We have to, in some sense, rise up to that place so that it can do its work. And its work is to connect the above and the below. without Daath, there is, there's what we have in the world. We have a condition where there's obviously some kind of disassociation between human life and possibly animal life and the higher life that many of us know is there, not just because our preachers and the higher ones and the authorities have told us, oh, there's a God in heaven and he made a bunch of rules and you better follow it or else. Many of us are aware that, that may not be true, but there's something. There is something greater. And that's pretty hard to ignore, because we can at least occasionally experience that. If you go into one of the forests up north with these incredible, gigantic trees, it's pretty hard to be there for very long without having some sense that, these aren't just bigger than me. There's something. This whole thing is bigger than me. There actually is something bigger than me. I'm not really in control of everything. Yes, we are all children of God, but when you wake up in the morning, how much God power are you actually emanating? It's true on one level. On other levels, it's not so true, and there's a dissonance there. There's some kind of break in our consciousness. There's some kind of break in our experience. This is not paradise. This does not seem to be the world that the highest God would have made. Really? Do we really need malaria? Honestly. Really? Malaria kills more people than anything else. Wars, whatever. A little parasite inside mosquitoes kills more people to this day than virtually every other cause. And, that doesn't seem right. Obviously, we can improve so many things, but then often what we're dealing with is those who are saying that they're trying to improve things, and then the trouble that they cause. And, we probably all have at one time or another been in that position of trying to help. I mean, haven't you had that experience? Where you're trying to help, and then you finally realize, I'm actually causing more trouble. This is not helping. The people I'm trying to help are not taking my good advice. They're not listening to me. They're arguing with me. You're fighting with the people you're trying to help. It's like, this is... And then, accidents and illness and plague and, nature that we're supposed to love. And we're sort of told nature loves us, but maybe sometimes, but other times she's quite brutal. Wipes out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people with a tsunami. So there does seem to be some disconnection between the higher ideals and even the greater love that we can sometimes experience. Higher consciousness. Well, this higher consciousness doesn't seem to have all these problems. Well, so what is the problem? Why are things so damn difficult? Well, they're difficult because there's a break in the system. There's a break in the system, and it's a break in the communication of the system. This is the Vishuddha, which I'm sure I'm messing up the pronunciation, chakra. It's the throat chakra, which is it has creativity and all sorts of other things, but sort of the obvious symbolism is communication. It is the communication. And if the above, with all of its sort of blessings, its wisdom, its understanding, its sort of crown of glory, isn't able to communicate with what's below it, and with what's below it is unable to communicate with it, then there are going to naturally be problems. And even more so, taking it down just to the personal level, when it's us, well, then we're often not really in deepest connection with essentially our own best interests. Why do people go to classes to find out what their purpose is? It's like, how come you're not just born raging, knowing your purpose? You should know your purpose before you come out of the womb. What are you doing here? You don't know? It's like, well, you can't just blame the people that don't know. This is a systemic problem. Most people don't know. Most people don't know why they're here. Many people have, no sense that there is a purpose even. They're just, I don't know, trying to get by. And it is a demanding world. It's hard to just skate by in this world. Whether you come in rich or poor, it's got its tentacles out for you, and it's going to make you serve, other masters than your higher self. So, even more important then, you should know what does your higher self want? What is the wisest, infinitely intelligent part of you want? What does it think? And on the other hand, is that highest reality, is it entirely aware of what's going on here? Because I don't think it is either. I hope not. If it's really, either it's very, very patient, or it's throwing up its hands, or I'm not sure what. It has long-range plans, I'm sure. But, the communication goes both ways. It's not just the highest divine, whatever, commanding us peons to do its bidding. No, us peons have some rights. We're unionizing, and it's a two-way street. It's got to be. It's got to be. You've got to have rights of some sort. I realize in many spiritual traditions, you're supposed to, especially crossing the abyss. You got to give up your ego. Because if you have an ego, you're just going to get slaughtered. Well, I think it depends on how you cross the abyss and how you deal with Daath, which I will get back to. What I would like to do is give a little bit of more sort of education on the tree, because it's such a, you look at it and go, well, there's a lot of stuff there. Yep, a lot of stuff. And you could be a nerd and memorize it, but it is helpful to have a sort of some kind of larger understanding of the structure. One thing I would first like to point out is that it's called a tree. It's called a tree. It's called the tree of life. Now, that right there tells you a lot. What are trees? Well, trees have always been considered archetypal magical beings because they unite, obviously, in some obvious way, they unite the earth with the heavens, and sometimes in a rather large and imposing way. They connect everything. There are many, many branches, many, many connections above, many, many connections below. And then they also produce fruit. The tree in Mesopotamia, there's a tree of life. Now, their tree of life generally was one tree, and it supplied eternal life and knowledge. and the knowledge was brought about eternal life. So it was a special kind of knowledge. In the Hebrew tradition, it was divided a little bit strangely, but possibly that's a useful too. So knowledge was separated from the divine life, and in some cases, it seems like they kind of buried some of that knowledge. They kind of hid it away. They didn't respect it the way it had been at one time. The knowledge was called wisdom, and it was the wisdom of the Queen of Heaven. The tree was always feminine. It was a feminine image, and they're not entirely sure exactly what was there, but it looks like in the Holy of Holies was something that Josiah and his purge took out of the temple and burnt, that represented the Queen of Heaven. Queen of Heaven, that was not invented by the Catholics, nor is it just something that that was borrowed from the Egyptians. It was part of the old Mesopotamian religion. It was a rather consistent religion and practice, actually, and they all had the god El. They all had the high god El, and then El had a wife, and then also there were he had sons, and each sort of nation had their own angel's son that appeared before the Lord in the court of the Lord, and was, I don't know, they worked things out. And of course they had wives too, and then the wife of the son of God and the wife of El sometimes become confused, or it becomes the same being, but she was always there. She was always there as the tree that gave forth much fruit and gave forth eternal life. So when we look at this, it doesn't look very much like a tree, but it is meant to be that in the sense that it's holding together everything. All of the wisdoms, all of the powers, all of the ways of interacting are gathered together in a single form that is meant to produce fruit, that is meant to produce, as they call it, the tree of life. But they don't say that, but it's also obviously the tree of knowledge, because you can't really ascend the tree without knowledge. And one of the very most important places of that knowledge is Daath, which means knowledge, the knowing. And in this case, now what we're knowing is we're knowing from above, of course. This is the place of the divine child. So the divine child knows their parents, as actually, most children actually know their parents far better than their parents would like to believe, because it would be embarrassing for them if they realized this, but they know very early. I actually remember, this is a little embarrassing, I actually remember having my diapers changed I was about 2.5 or 2 something, and I could hear, my parents were talking, and I knew they didn't know that I knew what they were saying. And I knew exactly what they were saying. I completely understood English. I couldn't speak it all that well, but I could certainly understand it. And I remember my dad he wasn't complaining, he was just wondering how long he would have to do this. And I remember I was shocked, because it had never occurred to me that he might not want to do that. I thought this is just his, who he is. He's the god of diaper changing, among other things. But that was part of it. But children actually know, a a lot. And in this case, this is a very special divine child because it's the divine child that has to do with what the Hebrews, the Kabbalists called tikkun. It had to do with the restoration of things. Things went wrong. Things are wrong. Things need to be fixed. Things need to be made better. And part of that being made better is the sort of awakening of this particular space. One more thing I would like to point out, and this is a little more technical, is the tree of life is meant to express reality from the sort of depths of materiality all the way to the absolute celestial heights, and then in a sense even beyond, because they're what are called the negative veils of existence, which sounds poetic and kind of strange. But the tree knows where it came from. The tree itself isn't unconscious. The tree is still whole. The tree knows what it is, and it knows that by being in kind of different dimensions at the same time. And there are 4 different dimensions that the tree exists in at the same time. Sometimes they'll show 4 different trees. Sometimes they'll do something called Jacob's ladder, where the trees are kind of meshing in on each other. But so the Yesod and Daath are sort of connected, and then you sort of have it go up. And it's very complicated. If at all possible, it should be very complicated. You should have to study and study and study until you're bent over and gray. But people are like that. They like doing things, and they like studying. And I like studying to a point, but I also like getting some things done. And I do not have time to study myself into higher consciousness. This is just, that's why I do magic. That's why I say the Mass, the Gnostic and Christian Mass. Why? Because it connects you with higher things, instead of just sort of studying them, because you can study forever. So I have a Buddhist Rinpoche, very high-ranking Buddhist guy. And in Buddhism, scholars are very, very respected. They have, they're kind of the Jews of Asiatic religion. They study, they really study. Then they memorize these things, They memorize books and books. It's just, wow. But, as he has said many times, you can be the greatest scholar in the world, and when you die, what? Then you just forget what you learned, and you have, how is this going to help you, in your further reincarnations or your ascent into greater consciousness? Well, it doesn't help that much. What helps is practice. And of course that practice actually means work, which is, I am always sorry to use that word. I must confess, it's not my favorite word, but, nonetheless. So there are 4 levels of reality that are being dealt with. And one kind of easier way to look at it is to do it all on one tree. And what they will do is, and again, whatever I tell you, there was somebody that will tell you different, because all of these things can be divided up 100 different ways, and there are many traditions, and the right tradition is basically if you actually do one, and, if you're actually doing something, and continuing with it, then that's a good tradition. What's not a good tradition is trying to fit all the pieces together so they actually fit perfectly, because guess what? They don't. Maybe if you're, in some perfect state of consciousness, all the pieces will fit together, but if you're trying to make them all fit together, you're probably not in that state of consciousness, and you're just going to drive yourself nuts, and I'm speaking from experience. Okay, so for the four worlds, Absoluth would include the supernals. Absoluth means emanation. So it's the sort of the divine pouring itself out. It is what it is. Right there. It's the full flesh. It is that from which everything else will be made. It's the original intention. It's the original inspiration, along with all of the energy and the intelligence and the will. And what they do Kabbalistically is, in each of the Sephiroth, Absoluth is the God name. So it refers to that level of sort of completeness and power and life. The Absoluth, the divine name in Kether, is Eheye, which is what when Moses was talking to the burning bush in the desert. Again, such strange imagery, a burning bush. That was at least a big bush. I don't know. And he asked, God was telling him to go back to Egypt, where he had just left because he had killed somebody, So now he's a fugitive. And so now he's supposed to go back and talk to these people. And so he says, well, who should I say is calling when I go back speaking for you? And he said, Eheye, Asher, Eheye, I am that I am. Or some people have translated as I will be what I will be. So this is the sort of the absolute power that's coming in from the unmanifest. And that is in each of the Sephiroth, except actually Daath, where we're pulling some things together, but they don't have actually a traditional name. So then we come down to the second of the four worlds. Highest is Absoluth. Even sounds kind of high. Absoluth. Bria. Bria means creation. And Bria is down here. It's Hesed and Gevurah and Tifereth. And this is the realm of the archangels. So when we're doing an invocation, we do the God name and then we do archangel name. And the archangels are really kind of embodiments of this divine power. They're becoming a little more human in a sense. They're a little bit easier to talk to. They can present themselves in human forms, although in the Old Testament they would appear looking exactly like humans, which is one reason why you have a tradition in many cultures where if a stranger comes to your door, you treat them like they're an angel, or a possible god, because you don't know, because angels were said to have come to people's doors, and this may well be true, and it may still be true. So, but here you can see this level of the tree is the higher intention, but it's becoming a little more formalized. Maybe it's a little more like the sort of archetypal images, the images of the gods, that around which stories will form, like with Tifereth, all the stories of the sun gods, or with Gevurah, all the sort of martial gods of fighting, and Hesed, the beneficent gods. But you're beginning to have their power become a little closer to us, a little closer to our needs. And then you get the third of the worlds, which is called Yetzirah, and it means formation. So, we're beginning to take form. And this is where they what are called the choirs of angels, but they're angels, spirits, higher level beings, but they're a little more individual, and they're working more individually. Okay, you want something beneficent to happen, but what? Let's get a little more particular, a little closer to home. And then finally, we come all the way down to Malkuth, which doesn't get any friends. It's all there by itself. And it's called Asiya. And it is the place of making. It's where you do the work, where you get your hands dirty with the earth. And the divine name is the name of the planet. So the divine name is really Earth. It's this place. And in the other Sephiroth, it's the planets, or eventually the stars, or what is beyond the stars. Some people are putting Uranus here and Neptune over there, but I don't really find these work all that well astrologically. Like the old version where Chokmah is the fixed stars. So it's, the non-planetary lights in the sky, that which is kind of permanent in the, celestial heavens. And then this was called Premium Mobile, which is in a certain more ancient astrology. It was, that outside of the whole system that made everything move. So it's the first mover. It's the power that makes everything run. So, when you think of the tree of life, think of a system that is uniting all of these worlds, all of these elements, and allows us to look at them, allows us to invoke them, to meditate upon them. And then what we will be doing after we hit Kether, we will be coming back down, following the paths. See, the paths connect everything. And we do something called pathworking. And the paths, the Sephiroth are thought to be pretty much there. Or they're archetypal powers that are pretty much sort of on their own. They don't need really much help from us. We can avail ourselves of them. We can help to awaken those things within us because we need them, and especially in a balanced way. You could easily be sort of more sort of anger management over here, or you could be more, I'm giving everything away and people are taking advantage of me. So, some kind of balancing out of things, good. But when you're working the paths, that's very much your own consciousness. It's very much, how are you going to relate these things together? How are you going to hold all these relationships together? Because they're relationships. They're not just standing on their own for their own sake. All of these Sephiroth are working together and meant to create a healthy and complete tree. There's a wholeness. We are meant to be whole. We are meant to be complete. We are meant to be a union and a consciousness that goes from the very highest to the very lowest and unites everything in between. So we will continue doing that, and the pathworking also is done by using the major arcana of the Tree of Life. And so those act like doorways to sort of enter into an imaginative experience of the path that sort of awakens these connections with us. And they're a lot of fun just because we use the major arcana. We have big major arcana, which are easier to read than this. And they're wonderful. It's such an amazing system. The tarot really is a just incredible system. At any rate, when I speak about Daath, and hopefully, in some sense, when I speak about all of these matters, I'm not just telling you what I've read. I am actually speaking from some measure of experience, which doesn't mean it's the greatest experience or the only experience. And actually, people often do make the mistake of thinking when they have an experience that, well, that's the way to do it. And I've come to some kind of recognition of the truth. And so everybody should do it the way I did it, because it worked for me, which is, grand arrogance and foolishness. So hopefully I'm not doing that. But I am speaking out of my experience, and I will tell you the experience that I had that made me know something of what Daath was. And again, it's just, in a way, it's just my experience, but it means that I have a connection that I can go back to. So, I have something that I can work with, as opposed to just what other people have found, which I can't always do, because I don't even remember what they did, so it doesn't always work. At any rate, briefly, my story, it was right before Christmas, and so I'm involved in this Gnostic Christian sacramental thing. So we're doing these rites. We're doing the rite of Christmas, but always with the sort of subversive Gnostic intention that it actually affect our consciousness, that we actually get somewhere. At any rate, I found myself being obsessed with the image of the child Jesus, which I'd never been before. I mean, I wasn't raised with that. My grandparents were Catholic, but I don't remember that particular imagery being in their home. And it wasn't like the baby in the manger thing. It was one of those standing ones where they're I don't know, they're like 3 or 4 or 5, and they are wearing royal costumes and giant crowns and stuff like that. But at any rate, it just was in my mind. I was like, I had no idea why, except that I was suddenly obsessed with it. So, I go up into the Hollywood Hills with some friends of mine who will be not named to protect the more or less innocent. They're not innocent, but I protect them anyway. And we took something, as we were wont to do, and I don't even remember what, but something that allows your consciousness to become a little liberated, and a little freer, and as I said before, I once went to a meeting for Albert Hoffman's 100th birthday in Switzerland. It wasn't actually the birthday party, but it was a sort of larger event. And there were all these German and Swiss scientists who look very German and Swiss. They do imposing really well. They do authority like you just look at them and go, "You're an authority." I believe it. And they were, to a man, this is mostly men, there were some women, almost some of them were crying, thanking Albert Hoffman for inventing LSD. He didn't just invent it, he did promote it. He understood it. It wasn't just, a fluke. He knew what kind of fluke it was. He was a deeper person. And they were just thanking him because their whole career was so deeply influenced by this. People forget that before even studying LSD became illegal, it was the most studied chemical in human history. There were thousands and thousands of real good medical studies that were done. They weren't all up to our current standards of double blind, blah 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 blah. But you can't really do a double blind with a psychedelic. You know if you've taken a psychedelic or not. This, come on. If nothing happens, nothing happens. If something happens, something happens. But at any rate, these people had built their careers on this, and they were, At any rate, I just wanted to say that while they were doing that, it suddenly dawned on me that I owed him big time. Because, I have some sense of the density of the consciousness that I had coming into this world, and it was, dense. Maybe average dense, but it was dense. And if it wasn't for these things, I would have been reading about things that I really wasn't experiencing. And once I experience them, then it becomes easier to experience them. Then you don't, it's not the only way. You don't have to do it all the time, but at any rate, I admit to these things with some pride and with real gratitude, serious gratitude, because, it's just like our where would our astro, I can't even think of the right word, I want to say astrology, and that's not the right word, the study of the stars in space, astrophysics, where would that be without our telescopes? Something that helps you to see. At any rate, back to my story. So we're up there. And I'm back to, why am I so obsessed with this baby Jesus thing? And I'm looking up in the sky, and for just a brief second I see the image, and then what I see is a kind of hole, and into that hole, the hole is Daath, and into that hole a crystal lens like clicks into place. And suddenly, there was power and consciousness pouring down, just torrents of power coming down, and from below, it's like the prayers were finally able to get up, and they were rising and rising and rising. And then something came down, and I guess it would have to be my higher self, and it was big, and again, I was just sort of blasted by this, and just like, but I remember walking over, we're up in the Hollywood Hills, so there was a bit of a, not exactly a cliff, but some place that was overlooking. And I walked over there, and I was looking at all of Hollywood below me and going, I could actually understand like every bit of that. Like every molecule. That's not beyond my ability to understand. Interesting. And then my companions were looking very shocked, because something happened. They knew something happened. It wasn't just a personal experience. And one of them had a problem with her shoulder for several years, I believe, and been to the doctor many times. And we had tried to magically heal it many times, to no avail whatsoever. And that healed. It's like, that healed. It's like, yeah, okay, something happened. Something happened. What does this mean? I don't know. Because I didn't know how to work with that. I didn't. Now, I think I might have some idea. And so what I'm proposing this evening is that we attempt to unlock that space, that we attempt to open that with that clear crystal there, with the aid of the divine child. Divine child is actually a pretty good image, even though it's not supposed to have one, for a couple of reasons. One, it is the place of the divine child on the tree, actually, but also it's something that works well in most human psyches. I think we recognize in young children that they can well be, as the poet said, trailing clouds of glory. That when we go back and far enough in our own very young childhood, we do have some kind of connection with that other world. We're not so caught in the reality of the necessities of this time, that we have some kind of relationship with the sort of eternal. So I think it works well that way. But also, strange birds outside. I think they're birds. There's a lot of creatures out there, Just because we're in the city, we're not that far from the mountains. There's creatures out there. The divine child here in this in this time, and the Christ child, the way it's used in religious imagery. And why are they using that? Well, because it works. Don't think that people are people are superstitious, of course. But if people have done something for 1,000 years, probably it works in some way. Was it the best way? I don't know, but there's something there. And there is a reality to this. There is a salvific principle, which is really part of the Gnosis and is part of Kabbalah. That we're not just doing this by ourselves. We're not just alone scrambling, trying to figure out something. It does often feel like that, yes. But for every effort we make toward wholeness, or toward the greater understanding, it is said, and I believe it's true, there's something on the other side reaching out to us too. There is an actual salvific power that relates to us individually, not just humankind or whatever, biological consciousness or something less personal. I'm sure that's there too, but it does reach out to us personally. And so when we call upon Daath, we can be calling upon that place within our being that is connected to that greater power to bring that crystal lens into place, bring that gnosis, bring that knowledge, whatever it is that we individually need, so that we can not just guess what's going on up there, we can see, we can feel, we can in some way sense actually what is above. And that part of it and us can actually in some way sense what is going on down here. So really connect. Really find that peace that passeth understanding. Find that kingdom that is not of this world. Which, even though it's not of this world, strangely enough, it's very important to this world. Because this world is just insane without it. And look at the world. It's a form of insanity. And nothing's more insane, really, than the people that are running it. What are they doing? They're first of all, it seems that their most important thing is to be in control, to be in, and to have power. It's like, I don't think that's why you're here. It's certainly not why I'm here. I'm not here for you to have power over me. That's for sure. But they kind of remain the powers as long as we're not able to see beyond them, as long as we're not able to see through them. Because when we can see what's actually on our own, through our own senses, through our own eyes, through our own inner knowing, when we can in some way touch that which is truly greater, then they have no power. Whatever, dance a jig for me, but you're not God. You're not my high power. You're not my purpose. And if you're saying anything other than love, I'm not listening to you, because I know better. And I can actually know better. We can actually know what's true. And certainly the Buddhists say that. That was the whole point of Buddhism. You can actually know what's true. Now, there are a lot of ways to go about it. And, it's definitely not something that you can just read in a book. That which is true, well, you can write it in a book, but it's no longer the truth. It's something written. The truth is something that lives in our heart. Truth is something that we know inside of us as true. And what I'm just suggesting is that we use this night to go past our own barriers, go past our own limitations, and see if we can't actually make some kind of contact with that fresh air of truth and life and love that always is communicating that is always saying, I love you and I welcome you. That always saying, I never see you as anything less than perfect. As well as knowing that whatever we have going on in us, okay, we have problems and we have confusions and we have mistakes and we have karma. Oh dear karma, plenty of that. But there's a cure for karma. It's called forgiveness. Yeah. Karma does not have to be worked out, if you're going to wait for an eye and a tooth for a tooth to work out your karma, you're going to be here forever. Just forever. We have too much history to deal with every little bit of it. But forgiveness, That's what Jesus said. Forgive your enemies. Why? Because it breaks the spell of karma. It breaks it. It ends it. It doesn't have to go on forever. If karma went on forever, there'd be no love. Love is greater. Love is greater. And so we can forgive ourselves. First, you have to forgive yourself, and that's often more difficult actually than forgiving other people. You'd think it wouldn't be. You'd think it should be really easy to forgive yourself. You know, I don't know. It's a bit of a Western problem too. I know the Tibetans, when they came here and they had people telling them that they hated themselves. They were, hate yourself? That's a new problem. I thought the problem was supposed to be you love yourself too much. And so here these people are hating themselves, and they're good people on top of it. This is really pointless. So forgive yourself. Forgive others. Jesus said, on the cross, but according to tradition, forgive them for they know not what they do. Well, that's pretty evident. Pretty evident, they know not what they do. But, when it hurts, it's hard not to get upset. But as much as we can, let it go. Let the past go. Let even our successes go. Let our failures go. Let it all go for just one night, for a few hours. And see if we can't just penetrate right to the truth. And I think we can. I think that everyone in here is quite capable of doing, astonishing things. And if we work together, it does work better. I've had a lot of experience doing these classes, and I have to say that, I'm a great, great magus that I am. It has a lot to do with the people here, a lot. And what they're ready for. I don't know. Are you ready for Daath? Are you ready to open that gateway to astonishing truth? As well as, again, I often in spiritual practices, it's so much up, that we forget that, there's some stuff down here too. And I want to honor this stuff too. I want to honor our physical selves, honor the physical world, honor the spirits that are tied to this. Because they need to be able to reach up too. When we open this doorway, it isn't just so that we can have great stuff come down to us. It's also so that what's below can communicate with what's above. And maybe it has some complaints, whatever, but it's a two-way street. Daath is the place that honors clear communication. It's like, let's talk. Let's talk. You can't have good communication if there isn't any. You're inevitably, we live in a world of confusion because we don't have that deep communication. So we're calling upon those who are in a position to say, okay, let there be clarity. Let the gate open. And then come what may. Because I'm not afraid of what happens when that gate is open. Because I know it's really good. It's really good. Because what's on the other side of that is real love. love that in this world is almost impossible. Because it's the source of love. It's not just finding love in a particular situation or with a particular person or circumstance. It's the absolute life, light that is the living love. And it's been separated from us. We've been separated from that for a long time. And I think it can end. I think that separation can end. I think that we can live much more closely with the depths of our being, with the heights of our being, and be like a tree, where your roots are fine in the ground, and you're nourished from the ground, but you're also nourished from the air and nourished from the sun. And you're bringing all of this together. Of course, they don't mention the mycelium that we know about now. That's another metaphor in a way, but that it's the mushrooms, the mushroom mycelium under the ground connect something like 75% of all plants in a living, intelligent network. So what's underground isn't just dirt. It's profound intelligence that's relating all of these plants together, that allows them to share nutrients with each other, allows trees to share with their own offspring. So the mushroom helps the tree actually take care of its own. Well, the mushrooms also have their own, ideas of what they want. But still, there's all kinds of stuff going on underground, in the depths, in the unconscious. And that is part of the tree. That is blessed, that is alive, that is good, that's part of how it works. And so the divine can come down to touch that too, and that can reach up and touch the highest. So that is my intention for Daath, that we actually open that doorway a bit. Even if individually we open it just a crack. Just a crack. As in the Leonard Cohen song Anthem, where he says, there's a crack in the world. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. Yeah. We can't just hold it all together. Sometimes we have to break, in a way, the system that has already been there and let something else work. And again, that is what Daath is. That is where the divine child comes in. And I'll give a little guidance when we're doing the actual meditation and such. But what I'm asking is that you individually decide how much are you ready for? How much of the highest truth are you ready for? Are you willing to let it speak? Are you willing to make that kind of connection? And then tonight, commit to that. Because that's what we're going to do. And I think it will be fun and will lead to a lot more fun. Because my vision of reality is it's going to be fun. if it's not going to be fun in some way, I've had it. I've had enough, apocalypses. We've had enough disasters. We've had enough wars. What are we going to learn by it? Another, horrible disaster, another plague, another whatever. There's nothing to be learned. There is something to be learned from the greater truth of our own being. And then we'll see what we do. We'll see. So with that, I thank you very much. We'll take a little break, and we'll come back for the invocation of Daath. Thank you.